Welcome to our May solution session with CounterSketch. My name is Heather Kutzman and I am the CounterSketch product manager. And in this month's webinar, we're going to talk a little bit about Pinterest to price. We've got two different examples to look at this morning. One is looking at kind of an antique style band and how we could create that using freehand parts. And the other has to do with using creating personalized necklaces. So I know we just got through Mother's Day. We're also kind of looking forward to a lot of graduations and things like that. And I know that personalization is really a hot trend even for self-purchasers right now. So we're going to talk about how you can build some of these customized necklaces in CounterSketch. The other thing we're going to focus in on today, the tool that we're going to take an extra special close-up look at, is Any Gem, Any Color. So this again can be really helpful when you are helping the customer to kind of visualize what the finished product is going to look like. So that's another one that we will explore on today's webinar. Finally, we're going to talk about some popular pendants. So CounterSketch is most commonly used for rings. However, we also have a decent collection of pendants that continues to grow. So I wanted to just zero in on our pendant options, kind of talk about some of those and go over some of the more popular ones. So that's what we're going to hope to cover in our hour together this morning. And I'm going to go ahead and get us started. So as I mentioned, the first thing we're going to talk about is our Pinterest to price this morning. And the first style band that we're going to kind of consider are what I like to think of as kind of these vintage looking bands. Some of them are truly vintage, some of them are just kind of replicas or kind of bands that are intended to look more vintage. I think something that is common among this type of design is that they have really small prong set stones typically as part of the design. Sometimes they're bezel, as you can see in that one at the bottom. They have these heavy metal outlines. So as you look at all of these, we've got the bezels. Here we have this really distinctive mill grain pattern kind of weaving in and out of the one in the upper right. And then on this one on the left, we have some really strong kind of lines holding this piece together. So the other thing you'll notice is that mill grain or some type of texture is often common in the design. If it is an older design, potentially that mill grain has worn off, but typically there is some type of texture or mill grain or pattern work. Even on this one here, you can kind of see there's a little bit of metal pattern work on the side. So these bands are really I think they're very pretty and they give a lot of detail and they're all very unique. And so it is oftentimes that when a customer brings in kind of maybe an inspiration board like this where they're saying we like lots of aspects of all of these different designs that we've created, it's necessary to build the design out using freehand parts rather than necessarily being able to find one already existing in the CounterSketch library. Now we do have something very similar to this design at the bottom that could easily be kind of modified and updated using freehand components, but for this morning we're going to kind of create a version of the ring that's kind of a combination of this style and this style. Maybe we really like this square set stone in the center, but we also like these kind of petal shaped pieces along the side. So we're going to jump in and build kind of a mishmash or a combination of these bands all put together to create kind of a vintage style band. So let's go ahead and hop over into CounterSketch. As I mentioned in the last webinar, it's still true for this one. The version of CounterSketch that I'm using may look slightly different from yours. We are in the process of testing for our next update, and so what I have on my screen is kind of the first draft of what our new update will look like. So my tiles may look a little bit different than yours, but all the functionality that I'm going to use is exactly the same. So there's no new tools or anything like that I'm going to use that you don't have in your CounterSketch version. Everything is exactly the same, it just looks a little bit different. So as I mentioned, we're going to hop into our CounterSketch Freehand Parts, and that's how we're going to build out this vintage band. I'm going to start with a shank to kind of give me a base for my design. So I'm just going to left click on that shank's tile box, and then I'm going to find a band, something like this, that I can open at the top to add my design. So this one looks pretty good. You'll notice that there are some accent diamonds on this band. In our original photo, we didn't have any accent diamonds. So if we need to, we can come in here and turn those gems off. And now we just have kind of a really plain shank that has a more open top to it. Now that we've got our shank out on our screen, we want to get our finger size correct. So we can come in here and adjust our finger size to maybe a size 6. In addition to that, because I'm going to be building kind of on this open space at the top and I don't have anything to guide me, I want to add a ring rail guide so that I can be sure that as I place these additional components, they don't cut into my finger rail. So I'm going to come down here and click Add a Freehand Part. And I'm going to choose this option in the upper left, which is just a ring rail guide. So let's left click on that and bring it out onto our screen. That ring rail guide is again going to help us to maintain the overall shape of our ring so that we don't cut into the finger. But you'll notice that that ring rail comes out in a size 7, and if you'll remember, we changed the size of our shank to a 6. So we need to update our ring rail to that size 6. And this also helps to remind you that when you're working in freehand, everything isn't updating parametrically. When we work with library models, typically, anytime we make an adjustment to the ring, everything is going to update and kind of automatically shift based on the changes that we make. However, you can see here that with freehand parts, we really do have to be really mindful of the different components, and if we make an adjustment to one that impacts others, we need to go back and make that adjustment there as well. So we've got our size 6 shank and our size 6 ring rail, and now we want to start adding out kind of the details of this design. So I'm going to go and add more freehand parts. To do that, I'm just going to left click on Add Freehand Parts, and I'm going to go into Shapes because this is where we can find different shaped components to kind of create the base for our design. Fortunately, we also have some components in our shapes category that have stones in them and already have mill grain. So this is really, really helpful when we're laying out patterns like this. In the past, we may have had to add the shape, then the mill grain, then the stone, and components like this could be up to 3 pieces each. But we now have these new parts and we can add them out really easily and kind of have a cohesive piece rather than piecing things together. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit so we can take a closer look at this piece. You can see here that we've got a couple of different shapes to choose from. So if we wanted more of a pear shape, a round, a square, the marquee shape, or an oval. So a couple of different ones to choose from. And we also have the ability to adjust the size of that center stone. So I'm going to go just a little bit larger on that center stone size. And then we can also adjust the width and the length of the setting. So we can come in here, if we wanted to make this longer, we can kind of play with these different dimensions of our piece to really change the overall look of that component. I'm pretty happy with it the way it is. I'm going to make it maybe just a little bit longer to give it more of a leaf or a petal shape, but that's pretty close to what I'm looking for. So we're just going to left click and drag this component up, and then we want to place it kind of starting at the outside over here on our right side to kind of create that first petal in that pattern that we had in the photo. So I'm going to rotate this design 90 degrees by holding down the Shift key as I'm doing my rotation, and that's going to ratchet it at 45-degree increments so that I can be sure that everything is lining up nicely. The next thing I'm going to do is just kind of bring my component over here to the side and bring it down a little bit. You'll notice also over here on the right that my setting has the ability to choose an enable pull to rail. So if I do this, it will actually enable me to wrap this component around the ring rail. Now, unfortunately for us today, because we're running this piece vertical instead of horizontal, or horizontal instead of vertical, that ring rail pull to rail doesn't help as much as we would like. So we're going to have to do a little bit of the work ourselves. But if you are using this component in something else, that's definitely something to take a look at. So I'm just going to rotate this around, and you can see that the height of my component is a little bit different than the height of my matching band. So what I want to be able to do is actually go back to my band and just decrease this overall thickness a little bit. So at my shank top thickness, I have 2 millimeters, and I can left click and drag this to the left and bring it down a little bit so that that design kind of looks a little bit more cohesive with the overall shank. I'm going to bring it up just a little bit as well, and now it starts to fit into my design nicely. So we can kind of see how this is going. We've got our one component here, and I just want to make sure that it touches that ring rail that we've got down here at the bottom so that we maintain our finger shape. So we've got one on the left side. We're going to mirror this over to the other side, and now we'll have 2. I'm pretty happy with the changes that I've made to this component. I don't want to have to go back and make those changes again. So instead of going back to my freehand part menu and grabbing a new part out, I'm just going to come in here and choose duplicate selected. And that's going to make a duplicate of the component that we already have. So that addition to the length, the shape, the increase in the stone size, all of that is going to be updated. And when it duplicates, it drops right out on top of the prior piece. So what we need to do to see these now is just drag them out away from the initial piece, which is what we did. So now we can see them. And for this piece, we want kind of 2 petals touching one another, right? There's one on either side, and it kind of creates like almost like a leaf look. I'm also going to have a little bit of overlap in my mill grain here, just so that it kind of looks more cohesive and pulled together. Now that we've got one on kind of our top, we need one on the other side. Because we had mirrored our initial part, we're already getting a side mirror for this piece. But what I want to do now is do a quad mirror instead, and that will give me those 2 components. So looking at this from the top, we've got a pretty good start, but you can see that our piece is starting to kind of take off and go out into outer space. So we need to bring it back down just a little bit so that it's staying in contact with that ring rail. So we can kind of start to rotate these pieces around a little bit and bring them back down towards that ring rail. If this is difficult to see, you can always use your through finger view, and that will show you a true through finger perspective so that it's easier to kind of follow the lines of what you're working on. So now we've got this piece. I'm going to go back to perspective view. I think that's easier, at least for me, to work in. So I'm going to switch back over, and we just want to rotate these pieces just a little bit. We can also rotate them out if we feel like it's starting to collapse on itself a little too much. And that brings our piece together. So now we've got our ring kind of pulled together. You can see we've got our shank, we've got our side accent pieces, and we've got a little bit of a gap in the middle. Now this gap can be filled with pretty much anything our customer wants, or we can always come in and decrease the amount of the gap by just bringing these components closer together. So again, this is really kind of the fun, I think, of the freehand components, is you can kind of drag things around until you get your spacing the way that you want it. I'm going to bring these back out just a little bit, and we're going to go with that idea of placing kind of a larger stone or maybe a rectangular stone in the center to finish out this design. So we've got a couple of different options. Like I said, this is where you can kind of really express your creativity and your customer can add their own style to this piece. So we can go down. I really liked that component that we were working with, but I think I'd like the version that has two stones rather than one for my center, since it's a little bit of a larger area. So I'm going to open up this other piece, and again I've got some shape options that I can choose. Right now we've got our marquee shape, so if I want I can drag this straight up and kind of take a look and see what I think about that. And that looks pretty good. I'm actually not opposed to this piece at all. We might need to back these pieces out just a little bit so that they're not interfering with the design quite as much, but that's a pretty good look for this design. The other thing we can do is kind of flip through these. Oops, wrong one. Let's go back to our large one and see if maybe we wanted to add something a little bit more square to the design. Again, when the customer originally showed us those pictures, there were a couple that had square centers, so maybe we want to offer that as an option. So we've got a couple of different ways that we can work with this. Again, we want to keep that ring rail guide in mind and just drag this piece back down a little bit into our center to make sure that we're making good contact on that design. But that's a way that you can kind of use these kind of pre-made pieces that already have the mill grain. They easily change shape. They've got the stone in the center. Everything is kind of ready to go, and build out one of these antique bands kind of fairly quickly using those already existing components. Oh yeah, Carla said it looks a little bit like a butterfly, kind of the way we have it with the wings out here. Very true. I was wondering if doing a square would make it more butterfly-ish, but I think the oval is the best. Again, you can always play with your materials on this, so if, for some reason you wanted to add a rose gold component, you can come in here and update all of these to be in rose gold maybe rather than the white, and that'll really make it hopefully look like a butterfly. So I'm going to start a new session, and then we're going to hop back over into PowerPoint and kind of look at our next option. So I'm sure that several of you have seen this trend in your stores where we're doing these personalization necklaces. Sometimes they're more of a script or a monogram. Sometimes it's more of a block. Sometimes it's an open necklace that's kind of pierced looking. And sometimes it's a bar or a plate where we're actually putting the engraving into something else. So these are kind of the types of ideas that we are looking for, and we're just going to take it maybe a little bit of a step further to create something very different. And we'll also talk about how once you have a word laid out, you can really take that word and apply it to just about anything. So really be versatile and kind of respond to whatever your customer is looking to purchase. So let's hop back over into CounterSketch, and we're going to look now at Freehand. Within Freehand, we do have a text field. So these are all the different text options that are currently available. We've got some that are very we call it a chiseled look, where you can really see all the dimension of the font. And then as we scroll down, you can see we have a couple of other ones that are more flat, maybe a little bit more readable if you are doing something where you don't need a lot of texture. So you can see these, and we've got both lowercase and uppercase letters. We also have this neat kind of circle monogram where you have a left, center, and right letter for each letter in the alphabet. And then we finally have our lowercase cursive font, and this is the one that we're going to play with today. It's been really popular lately, this kind of idea of a lowercase cursive can be something that's really trending, and so that's part of the reason we looked at adding it to the library. And I'm just going to spell out love rather than someone's name in particular. And at first what I'm going to do is literally just go through and add the letters to the screen. So I'm just getting all my letters together, and then I'll go back and place them once I have them all. So my last letter is E. And we'll just add it out onto the screen. And I'm just double left clicking to add these guys quickly. It skips the preview tile, but I know what I'm going for, so I don't need a preview that much. My recommendation at this point would be to bring out the grid. So this is going to help us just to make sure that we get everything lined up nicely. And I would use, because everything's stacked on top of each other the way I pulled it out here, I would use your parts tray down here to select items. So I'm going to start with the L, so I'm going to click on it in my parts tray, and then I'm just going to use this to kind of drag it to the right. Next I'm going to do the O, and because of the center of these letters, one's a lot bigger than the other, I'm going to have to drag this one down just a little bit so that we can kind of get connection on those two letters. And this looks about right. I have 4 letters in my word, so I want kind of the spacing between the 2 center letters to be at the center of my screen, which thanks to my grid, I can kind of see that that's working out the way I want it to. So then we'll bring this one down and over. And again, we're just kind of trying to get our placement about right. And then we'll bring down the E. And if I were going to do this as a cutout, so with the openings, probably what I would do is go grab a piece of metal and just close that up. You don't have to. For wearability reasons, I would rather those connect. So I can come in here, grab just a straight piece of metal, and make a connection between the V and the E at the bottom. So I'm just going to rotate this around. It's a little long as it sits now, so we're going to shorten it, keep shortening, and I'm also going to try to match the profile of my letters. So I'm going to go to something that has a rounded profile so that it kind of blends in with what we already have here. Now I'm going to look at this from a little bit of a different angle so I can see how my thicknesses are lining up. And I think what I'm going to do instead is actually go in and make this an oval. So I've already got it round, but I want it to be taller. So I'm going to come in here and change my profile height. Oop, way too much. And bring it down. So that kind of helps it to blend a little bit. Now that we've got it approximately in the right place, I think what I'm going to do is come in and do just a little bit of bending so that I can get it so that it looks a little bit smoother. And it could be that all I need to do is just decrease my length a little bit. And then I'm going to switch modes. So to get to bend, I'm going to left click on the blue box. And you can see now I've got my bend handles out on the screen. And so I just want to get my bend handles going the right direction through my piece. I want it to go this way. And I'm just going to try to contour this a little bit so that it looks more like a cursive piece, right? So that it looks like we've kind of bent it into place. I don't know about this. This is too much bend for me, so I'm going to straighten this back out. And then if you need to, as always, you can go in and move your bend spine around. So I'm going to come in here, see that yellow circle? That's the one we're going to try to grab, and we're going to lengthen it this way. And now we can come in here and kind of meld these two together. And again, it's going to be a back and forth, so I feel like still this is maybe just a little bit too long. So if I shorten it, when I go to do my bend, I can kind of stretch it a little bit more and get it more exact. Alright, so that looks pretty good. We're going to hop out of our bend mode and kind of take a look. Again, the only time that I would necessarily add that component in there is if I was just going to attach my chain to the sides of this and it was going to be more open. So that's when you would want to kind of close everything up and make sure that it's nice and solid. You don't have to do that again, but you can if you want. If you don't like that piece, you can just come in here and hide it, and then we've got a little bit of an opening down there at the bottom again. So we've got our love words spelled out. You can kind of see here your size. So the L, which is the largest piece, is about, and each one of these little squares is 1 millimeter. So we're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.5 maybe. And then if we look at our smaller letters, we're closer to maybe 4 millimeters high. So that gives us an idea of the scale. If we need to scale everything up, we can, but it may cause us to do some adjustments as well. So a lot of times what I will do when I've got a word like this is I'll go in and I'll select and group all of the letters together. So I've got the L, I'm going to hold down Shift on my keyboard, and then I'm going to left click, I'm going to hold down Control on my keyboard, and then I'm going to left click on all of these letters. And I've selected the L first because that's going to be kind of my starting point, and then all of the others will kind of add in. So now we've got these guys all selected. We're going to go to our starting point letter and select the option to create a group. Now you can see all of these letters are grouped together so that we have them in one place. If I want to, I can come in here and increase the overall height of these letters all with one movement, so I don't have to go through and try to line everything up and get it perfect. We know that they're grouped together and they're the right size. The next thing we can talk about, like I said, if you wanted, we could really quickly add 2 rings to this and have a chain connected, and this would just be kind of a cutout necklace. Alternatively, you can go into your shapes and kind of add whatever you would like as a background. So this is where it starts to get really kind of creative and a lot more fun, I think, in laying out the design. So we've got tons of hearts, which make me think of love, so we can always go in and grab a heart outline or just a regular solid heart and add it to our screen and just place this love that we've created inside the heart, in front of the heart, however we want to do it. So I'm going to go ahead and make my heart a good bit larger. So maybe we can put it inside. Maybe I'll drag this down just a little bit. And then we can go back and shrink our heart just a little bit so it fits in there. Now you can see that I've got an overlap on my L and not on the E. So we're going to select the group and move the entire group to the right just a little bit so that it sits nicely inside that heart. We can also look at our height and kind of bring it down so that it's tucked inside. The other thing we can do is add a bail. If we don't want this to be a necklace but rather a pendant, we can go to our bails and add a bail out onto our screen and use that to connect our heart of our personalized necklace to a chain. So really quickly, just how you can kind of do that one way. Another thing that we can do is I'm going to hide the bail and our heart. And instead this time maybe we're going to do just a solid bar behind it. So we'll come in, grab a solid piece, And it can be flat or rounded. I think the flat looks a little bit better, so that's what I'm going to choose. And then rotate it this way, and then just make it as large as we need it to be. So we're going to use this. And what's great about this is you can kind of customize the size of the bar for whatever your word is or whatever the name is. So you can kind of truly be in control of kind of making all of this fit together. And then we can go in and add those rings on the side if we want. So we can come into our wire, rope, and knot, add a ring out onto our screen, and then just place it in our piece. So we're going to make this a good bit smaller. And I don't think it needs to be quite that thick. And I made it so small that it sunk into my metal, so let's grab it again and bring it out here. And then we want to rotate it so that it's facing 90 degrees. So again, we're just going to hold down Shift, rotate these guys out, and put them on the corners. So I'm going to use my side mirror to get one on the other end. And I even sometimes will do something like this where we kind of rotate it a little bit, especially if it's going to be a shorter necklace and we want it to hang a certain way. And that opening's a little small, so we can make this a little bit bigger. And there we go. So again, lots of options here for you guys to play with. Once you spell out the word, then it's kind of your creativity is the only limit that you have as far as how much bigger, how much larger you want this piece to be, what kind of background you want it, if you want it as a cutout or placed on top of a piece of existing metal. You can really kind of work with it a good bit to create a lot of different looks. So we're going to talk a little bit about Any Gem, Any Color. I really like this feature. We just got through Mother's Day, so I wish I had the opportunity to talk about it a little bit before then. Any Gem, Any Color is especially helpful when you're doing mother's jewelry, and it's also helpful when you're doing bridal, where you want to mix in a few gemstones to kind of add a little bit more personalization. So Any Gem, Any Color is all about choice. And it also gives you an opportunity to view the final piece. So sometimes it can be difficult to visualize what this might look like if we had, a sapphire, diamond, sapphire instead of all diamonds. And so with the Any Gem, Any Color, we can help the customer to see that more easily. And it's pretty easy to use as well. That's why I like the tool so much, as it's very, very simple. And so all you're going to do is open up a design that you'd like to work with, and then you're going to select the gems. So you're going to kind of left click on the gems that you want to change the color of. Then you're going to select the material that you want to apply to those selected gems and click and hit enter. And hit apply. And then apply is going to take that material, apply it to those gems, and then you can continue on. If you want to change other colors, you can do that. If not, you can click done, and it's going to save the changes that you've made to that model. So pretty straightforward, but we'll walk through it really quickly anyway, just so we can get a quick view of what we're doing. I might do this as a mother's ring just to make it a little bit more timely. And we've got quite a few mother's rings to choose from. There's lots of them you can see here. Maybe I'm going to pick, I don't know, how about this guy down here? I think this is a neat style. So we'll open this one up. And again, we're just going to open our Any Gem, Any Color, which is down here in the lower right. Left click on the gem that we want to change, select the material, and say apply. Then same thing here, left click here, select the material, and apply. And it's super easy. You can select more than one gem at the same time if you want. Same story, you just left click on the material and say apply. So it's really easy to use. We've used it here in kind of larger stones, but you can do it with Melly if the customer wants to see what, every other stone in emerald, every other stone in amethyst wants to look like in a diamond halo. You can show them that visually on the screen before they commit to making the purchase. So really, really a good option here. When we're done, we just say done. If we aren't crazy about the combination that we've come up with and we want to go back to what we had before, you can click on clear and it'll take those choices away, and then click on done and it'll take you back to your customization screen. So quick run through of any gem, any color. Sounds like you guys are pretty familiar with that feature and how it works already, so I won't spend a lot more time there. Let's move on to talk a little bit about our popular pendants. So these are some pendants. A lot of these have been in the library for some time, and a couple of them are fairly new. So I just wanted to walk you through these pendants. Again, if you want, you can jot down the style numbers and take a look at them in your own time. But you'll notice that a lot of them are halo styles, so maybe a modified halo here. And some of them have that bail that's a secondary piece so that we've got some movement. And some of them are just solid pieces. Some of them don't have a two-part casting. And that's something that you do want to consider when you are designing a pendant in CounterSketch, is if we were to cast this piece, we would have two casting fees because this pendant piece is going to be separate from our main component. So this would be two separate casting fees. The second piece is considered a trim, so I think it's only about $29 for your casting fee for that second piece, but it will impact your cost, so just keep that in mind. Whereas these two, this piece here and the one above, are really a lot more solid. They're not going to have any movement to them, but you're going to have a lower manufacturing cost. So just something to think about. Pieces like this I have seen done really beautifully using that any gem any color component, so making one circle in one gemstone, another circle in another, and then kind of floating another stone in the center can be really pretty. And you'll notice too that these are really classics. So we've got kind of this great cluster, these two halos, and then this style actually has a matching ring that goes with it. So this would be another one to consider and think about. But these are all beautiful pendants, really great options of things that you can do with them, and they're also really great remounts. So if you're looking at remounting maybe the first engagement ring and now she's upgraded, these are great ones to use for those types of remounts, as well as gemstone remounts. So some good options to consider. I know our pendants don't get as much love as some of our other categories, but we do definitely have a good selection, so be sure to check it out. I'm going to hop back over into our pendants really quickly and pull up kind of some of the latest ones that we've added to the collection. So again, this is a really new style that we just recently added, and it also has a matching ring that goes with it. So this would be a great piece if you were looking to kind of sell a set. This piece is really unique as well, kind of got some neat curves to it, and it comes in lots of different center stone shapes, so you can make a lot of changes with that particular piece. This one is fairly new and also kind of our flagship piece for our pendant, so this is a great one if you're looking to do something a little bit more vintage. And this one has a lot of options, so you can go in and remove stones, you can remove millgrain, and kind of really update the look of this design pretty quickly. Another one that I've really liked working with a lot lately, and I am hopeful will be on our most popular styles soon, is this design here. I think it's a really beautiful piece, and it updates again with all of these different center stone shapes. It's really great if you are doing something with a gemstone. The look of it just really kind of showcases any kind of gemstone that you put in the center. So if we were to throw a green tourmaline in there, you can see that it really makes that gemstone pop whenever you use something like this, where you've got this beautiful filigree design around the side. I have also been guilty of taking this and using it as the centerpiece for a ring and connecting a shank on the sides of it. So this piece is really versatile and a lot of fun to work with as well. Just a reminder, please join us on social media. We are at all of these places, so Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and I believe soon to be LinkedIn. So just look for us under Gemvision Corp. Anytime we have new updates coming out in the software, which we hope to have one coming up towards the 1st of July, we're going to have some previews of those tools in our social media at that time. It's also a great way for you to share designs that you're doing. So if you're posting renders or maybe actual photos of finished pieces that you've created in CounterSketch, please do hashtag Gemvision, and we will happily share the designs that you're creating with the rest of our followers to kind of help inspire one another. So again, join us on these social media pages and use the hashtag Gemvision when you post things, and we'll be happy to share the designs that you're creating with the rest of our users. As I mentioned at the top of the webinar, we do record this webinar. So we have a recording of the webinar, and all you need to do to view that recording is go to stellar.com/webinars. So this is where you can register for next month's, for June's webinar, as well as where you can watch a recording of this webinar. So the recording of the previous month's webinar stays up for a month, and then we take it down. We also share the webinar recording on our YouTube channel now as well, so you can find it on YouTube at stellar.com/webinars. Either of those places will work. And if you're on stellar.com, you just click watch now. So this again can be helpful if you are looking to, have other employees maybe spend a little bit of extra time with CounterSketch. They can go in and view the recording and get that information. All right. Just a reminder as well, we've gotten a lot of interest in our remote training options lately. I wanted to make sure that you guys were aware that we do offer one-on-one trainings. So if you're looking for a one-on-one interaction with one of our trainers, if there's a specific aspect of CounterSketch that you want to learn more about, we do offer that, and it's only $145 an hour. You tell us what we want to learn, our trainers prep for that 1 hour class, and then once we know what you're looking to learn, we spend the hour focusing on that information. Most of the time we also record that session with you, so that's a great way for you to kind of learn a little bit more about CounterSketch. We also have our online academy, so this is a great place for you to go and learn how to use CounterSketch from start to finish. There's some great videos on there that you can watch at your leisure, so whenever you have time you can log in and join on the academy once you're a member and check out those videos when it's most convenient for you. Our next solution session is going to be the June solution session, and that's going to be on Thursday, June 11th at 9 a.m. Central. We are going to do Pinterest to price examples. We're going to do a deep dive into Render and that tool set, and talk about just how you could use Render when you are working in CounterSketch to really help to promote your business, as well as share visual images with your customers so that they feel comfortable moving forward. The next thing we're going to do, and this is something new I'm going to try next month, we're just going to focus on the new designs. So as most of you know, we add 8 new designs and several freehand parts every month if you're current on your monthly subscription. And so we're going to focus in on just those new designs rather than kind of picking a category. We're going to check out what's new and kind of the really great features of those new models that we added in May. So that's what we're going to look at. Again, to sign up, you just go to www.stellar.com/webinars. Again, thank you for your time this morning. I hope you're all well, and I will look forward to seeing you on a future webinar.